Welcome to the Bettendorf Public Library's Take-Home Workshop. Today we're making salt dough suncatchers. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's in our kit. So in our kit, you're going to find these little cutters. They look like this. One is circular and one is a teardrop shape. We made these on our 3D printer. Again, you can use just your regular cookie cutters, but most people don't have them this small. I know I didn't. So we made some for you on our 3D printers so you can use those to cut out designs if you'd like. You're going to find a mitten pattern to use for the shape of your suncatcher. You obviously don't have to do your suncatcher in this shape, but we're all about the mittens these days as we're taking part in our Smitten with Reading winter reading program. So we're all about mittens. So we're offer you a mitten pattern. You'll get a piece of tissue paper that will be placed on the back of your suncatcher. This gives a little color and a nice glow to your suncatcher. You're going to have salt and flour, and we'll talk a little bit more about the proportions of those in just a sec. You're going to have a little bit of glue in a straw like this. And then you're going to have a skewer, which I found worked really well for cleaning up my edges and getting gunk out of the holes if the cutters didn't make a clean cut and things like that. What we're asking you to supply is a little bit of water, a knife. Now I found that just a regular bread knife works great. You're not going to be slicing so much as you're going to be pressing. So something with a blunter blade works just fine. You're going to need something to roll with. Now I am going to be using my trusty rolling pin. Again, because this dough is all edible, I don't have to worry about using my kitchen tools that I use to work with food on this dough. I would not use my rolling pin on a polymer clay, but I'm going to use it here. But if you don't have a rolling pin, you can use any sort of cylinder that's going to withstand it. So the side of a bottle, of a soup can, perhaps a 2-liter bottle of pop, any sort of cylinder that is structured enough that it will press on the clay instead of the clay bending it. If you can bake your suncatcher or you can air dry it. If you bake it, which is considerably faster, obviously, you're going to need something to put your suncatcher on. I'm just using a regular baking sheet. A piece of foil would also work just fine. You're going to need an oven if you're going to bake. And then you're going to need a pair of scissors to get into some of our packaging and make some trims. So that's all the tools that we need. So let's get started. One more note before we get started though. This is the book that inspired this take-home workshop. It's called Dough Crafts by Isolde Kiskald. And this book, it was from our collection, which is where we go to a lot to get ideas for our take-home workshops. And it has multiple recipes and lots of examples of really great things that you can do and ideas for how to work it and all sorts of things. So if you're interested in pursuing more about this craft, then this would be a good place for you to go. One thing I forgot to mention that you're also going to need, obviously, is a mixing bowl. So we're going to start with our flour and our salt, and we're using a 2:1:1 ratio. So it's going to be 2 parts of flour to 1 part of salt to 1 part of water. And we're going to do 1 cup of flour. Now, in your bag, you're going to have more than 1 cup of flour, because once you get it in there and start mixing it up, okay, so it's about a cup, pretty close. Once you get in there and start mixing up, if it's too sticky, I mean, if you're working in a really damp area or something like that, or just your flour or your salt or even your water, there's something different. If we don't measure carefully, we can adjust, and the easiest way to adjust is by adding flour. If it's too wet, we add flour. If it's too dry, we add water. So I gave you more than a cup of flour in case we need to adjust. Then we're going to get a 1/2 cup of salt. And I'm measuring here, but your bag should be pretty close to exactly 1/2 cup. Okay. Then we're going to add a 1/2 cup of water. So again, that was a 2 to 1 to 1 ratio. We're going to stir this up. I'm using a wooden spoon, a spatula would work, but probably the best thing, honestly, is going to be your hands. So I'm just going to get it started with this. And then I'm going in. And this is where kids love it. Get in there and get all squishy. And I'm going to get all this stuff off the sides, get all that flour. Now this is still really, really wet. So I'm going to grab my flour and I'm just going to sprinkle in, I don't know, a couple tablespoons and knead that in. So it's coming nicely. And I want to keep going until it doesn't really stick to my fingers like that. And then when it gets pretty good, I can keep it in the bowl if I want, but I'm all about the messy kitchen. So I'm going to turn it out on my countertop and I'm just going to knead it, just like I'm kneading bread, just with my hands. And get all those little pieces picked up and stuck on there. And it's starting to get smooth, but as I knead it and I incorporate that flour, it's starting to get a little sticky again. So a little bit more flour. When it gets to the point where it's just a little bit sticky, if you're going to add more flour, you want to do it very judiciously because you want it to be sticky enough that it'll still hold together. You just don't want it to start crumbling and fall apart on you. So that's pretty nice. It's pretty soft. It's pliable. It's not too sticky. It's a little bit sticky. I'm going to add just a touch more, just a little bit. So you can probably see I'm adding, at this stage, not even a tablespoonful at a time. Just a little bit more. Okay, so now I have this great ball of salt dough. Now, if I wanted to, I could tint this, and you could tint it using food coloring. You can tint it using acrylic paint or anything like that. I really like the natural look, so I'm just going to take a hunk of this and tear it off and set the rest aside. And then this is what I'm going to roll out. You can save salt dough. I have found, like, put it in a Tupperware container, a plastic container, or perhaps a plastic bag. I had some in a plastic bag for not very long, a day or so. And when I took it out, it was way stickier. Like the water had really soaked in and really incorporated into the, in with the flour. And so it was so sticky that it was not, I couldn't work with it as it was. I'm gonna put a little flour down on my work surface since I have a little bit more left. And then I'll just re-roll this. So, but it was still usable. I just had to go back a step and I added a little bit more flour and rolled it up again and kneaded it out again, and then it's good to go. So you can hold it for a while. It's not going to stay good forever, but it'll stay a while. Oh, look at that. Look how nice that is. and it's kind of elastic and springy and beautiful. So we want to roll this out to not very thick, about a quarter of an inch thick, if that. Now I'm going to go wash my hands and I'm going to cut out my mitten pattern so that, and then I can just cut around that. So I'll be back in just a sec. So I've cut out my mitten shape and I'm going to use my butter knife to cut out around it. Now you'll see I'm not dragging so much. Dragging can leave these kind of almost torn looking edges. So I'm just pressing down. Pushes the dough down, kind of gives you a little bit of a sealed edge. It doesn't make for a perfect line around a curve like this, but we can clean those up really easily. So there's our shape, and we're just gonna get the rest of this dough out of there. Then we're gonna just take our knife and just smooth it out a little bit. You can use your fingers. I'm going to use my knife to cut down into the thumb a little bit more so that it looks a little more mitteny. Then I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to put it on my baking dish or my drying dish. So we talked a little bit earlier about baking or drying. These can air dry. It takes longer, of course, but it still works. So if you don't want to use the energy of your oven, if you don't want to do it in your oven, you can just put it out. If you can put it someplace warm and dry, that will be better. So if it was summer, we could put it outside in the sunshine, but that doesn't work so well this time of year. So for my design, I'm going to put a hole right at the top. And I'm going to put a hole right in the middle. And you'll see I'm pushing in and that's my oven preheating. I'm giving it a little wiggle because that helps the dough to come up with the cutter. It doesn't always do that. And you can always go back in and get some out if one of them doesn't come out, but it's much easier when it does. And once you get one, then the others will stick to it. The dough will just come up and come out the top of your cutter too, so you don't have to worry about that cutter kind of getting full of dough. So I'm just doing the teardrop shapes randomly, all pointing this towards the center, towards my little hole in the middle. And I'm just going to keep going around, putting those holes in wherever I want. Okay, so I've got my holes all cut, and you'll see some of them have a little bit that's stuck in there, or maybe the shape didn't come out right. That's where I'm going to use my skewer. Pointy end will get you some nice clean tips to your teardrop shapes. The other end, you can just use that and kind of run it around, and that'll help round out the round part of your tree. And I'm also going to use the base, and I'm going to put some lines down at the bottom because your mittens, that's what your mittens are like. They have a little ribbing. So this is all ready to go. Since I assembled it on my baking sheet, all I have to do is pop this in the oven. So it's going to go in the oven for a long time. 250 degrees, low temperature, a long time. If you go too hot, it could swell up and it could kind of burst. So we're going 250 degrees, and I'm going to start it with 90 minutes. And then at the end of the 90 minutes, I'm going to check it. I will flip it and put it in for a while longer. You can go another 90 minutes. It kind of depends on how thick you are. So let me put this in the oven and show you a couple examples. So these are a couple from my learning curve. So this one, they are in fact close to the same thickness. This was in for a full 90 minutes and then flip in another 90 minutes. But this one was in for 90 minutes and then a flip and then I think an hour. The biggest difference that I'm seeing here, since their width is about the same, is that this was fresh dough. This was the dough from a couple days old. So it could change color on you depending on age. It's going to change color depending on, you know, if you do this with different flour than what we sent home with you. There are different factors involved. However, I like them both. I both think they turn out good. I just haven't put my tissue paper on the back yet. But those are some of the variables that you might end up with as you're working. So we're going to bake the one I just put in the oven for an hour and a half all together probably. And then we'll take it out and see how it turned out and put our tissue paper on the back. Here's our finished baked Suncatcher. It was in the oven at 250 degrees for about an hour and a half. Flipped over about halfway through. So now I'm going to take my tissue paper, lay it down, put my mitten on top of it. And I'm just going to trace around. And this is how I'll know how to trim down, how far to trim down. So I'm just going to trim that down just inside those cut lines. And when I lay that on the back, I need a couple places where I can trim a little more closely. I don't want to see any of the tissue when I'm looking at it from the front. So I want it to be smaller than thin. Then I'm going to find my glue and snip the end off. And I'm just going to use my finger. Squeeze some out. And I'm just going to run it around the edge. And you can use a brush or anything else to spread your glue, of course, but finger's what I've got handy, so that's what I'm using. I'm just gonna go all the way around the edges, a little bit, all the way across the back, really. And we're gonna take and very carefully lay our tissue paper down. Now we're going to let that dry, and then tomorrow morning when the sun is shining, I'll be able to show you what that looks like in front of a hopefully sunshiny window. Now it's the next morning and our glue has dried, and I hung my Suncatcher up in the window. It has a beautiful golden glow, and it really looks lovely. This recipe gives you enough dough that you could make probably a half dozen or more of these. And you could fill in with different colors. You could have a rainbow of Suncatchers. You could make a garland. It would be a really lovely addition just to bring a spot of color to what is obviously a pretty gray day out there. Enjoy your Suncatchers and share your work with us, please, on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. We'd love to see what you've done. And our thanks to the Friends of the Bettendorf Public Library for sponsoring our take-home workshops.